So it ends. Luigi Mangione did it. All of it. Perhaps now the sickening spasms of folk hero sympathy can find another outlet or slink away in newly discovered self-awareness. Mangione had defense counsel, and that defense counsel on his behalf contested evidence and procedures, as was his rights under the Constitution and their obligations as his attorneys. But along the way, something strange happened. A sort of Avenger cult status began to attach to Mangione in certain segments of American life. Did he actually do it? Was he striking a blow against the system? Was the evidence gathered legally? Nonsense. Mangione did not cut a deal. He admitted guilt. Defense attorneys typically resort to sanitizing language in moments like this. It is a professional obligation. Here is Karen Friedman Agnifilo.
With today's guilty plea, Mr. Mangione has accepted full responsibility for the death of Brian Thompson, arising from the events of December 4th, 2024, outside of the UnitedHealthcare Investor Conference here in Midtown Manhattan. It was a single tragic event.
Arising from the events of December 4th, a single tragic event. Prosecutors, as is their habit, were more specific, more direct. This is Jamie McDonald, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
At 6:45 on a December morning, Luigi Mangione stalked and murdered Brian Thompson in cold blood on a public sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan. It was deliberate, calculated, and premeditated. In the days leading up to the murder, the defendant very carefully prepared for the attack. He tracked Mr. Thompson's whereabouts, conducted surveillance along the route he knew Mr. Thompson would take, and positioned himself to carry out the plan.
Mangione's defense attorney tried to underscore a sort of context to the crime, the subtext being this is why Mangione developed, as he did, this kind of cult following.
He endured years of severe, debilitating pain following a broken back while struggling to navigate our healthcare and health insurance systems. Like the thousands of people who've reached out since this tragedy to share their own experiences, he believed that the system had failed him and destroyed his life.
The prosecution had an answer to that contention, and it's one worth remembering in these agitated times.
We live in a civilized society governed by the rule of law. We debate, we disagree, we protest. We do not commit murder. No grievance, political belief, or ideological cause can ever justify murder. There can be no celebrity in assassination. Any person who celebrates, encourages, or excuses actions like these is fundamentally wrong.
With what went down in court and what's next, and that's important, we turn to CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. So what went down?
So what went down is Mangione pleading guilty to the federal charges, not based on an agreement, but instead deciding to plead open. And of course, we can talk about why that happened, but it's not as unusual as it is in state court. What we saw today is Mangione making factual admissions about why he was guilty and going through major what we typically see, as you know, in a decision to plead guilty, where a judge wants to make sure that when somebody is doing potentially one of the most serious things they can do, which is to give up their freedom, that they're doing so knowingly and voluntarily. The judge wanted to make sure you understand exactly what you're pleading guilty to. Nobody forced you to do this. And now walk me through and tell me a little bit about what led you to commit those crimes. So it was a very consequential day in court.
And what's next, Jessica?
So what's next is a couple of things. Obviously, in federal court, Mangione is going to be sentenced. And I think part of his decision to decide to plead guilty is that he wants to not just avoid trial, but he's hoping that the judge views his acceptance of responsibility as a mitigating factor. We know that he was facing up to life in prison. Obviously, he wants the judge to give him far less than that. And then what's next in another case? Well, in the New York case, he is also facing murder charges. And I think that's part of the reason you might have seen this guilty plea is that what he's hoping, and I think this is an uphill battle, but we already know he's filed a brief, or his lawyers have. What he's hoping is that under New York's double jeopardy law, that the entire murder case is tossed out. Now, we can talk about why I think that's an uphill battle, but that was scheduled to begin September 8th. I don't think it will, because I think there will be a lot of litigation about that particular double jeopardy law. But that's the thing we look to next.
So let's go to that. Why do you believe it's an uphill battle, Jessica?
So if you look at New York's law, which is much more protective of defendants than the Constitution, which, as you know, also prevents against double jeopardy, meaning that you can't have somebody tried twice for the same crime. Under the Constitution, Major, as you know very well, the federal government and the state government are separate sovereigns, so you can face federal charges and state charges for substantially the same acts. But there's a New York statute, and the general rule is you cannot face successive prosecutions based on the same set of acts or conduct. So this looks like it's great for Mangione, but wait and look at the exceptions. The exceptions are good for the prosecution. The exceptions basically boil down to if the two crimes, in this case, federal stalking and the state murder charges, if the elements are substantially different and the harms you're guarding against are substantially different, then you can have that next prosecution. And I think there's a very good case to be made that a federal stalking charge is substantially different enough from a state murder charge.
Walking us through it all, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much. I appreciate it.